6 defenders, 12% possession, an amazing strike from outside the box, and a stoppage-time header. That's the brutal arithmetic of England's World Cup semi-final exit, and by the time Lautaro Martínez wheeled away in the second minute of stoppage time in Atlanta, Thomas Tuchel's tactical gamble had blown up in the most spectacular way possible. Anthony Gordon had given England the lead in the 55th minute, a genuinely historic moment that had the Three Lions 40 minutes from their first World Cup final since 1966. But instead of pushing for a second, Tuchel hooked his goalscorer for Ezri Konsa in the 71st minute, dropped into a back five, and then doubled down by throwing on Dan Burn and Nico O'Reilly in the final quarter hour. Argentina, sensing blood, camped in England's half. Enzo Fernández equalized in the 85th minute, and Martinez delivered the dagger moments later. Wayne Rooney called it a loss of belief. Alan Shearer said Tuchel played his hand far too early. Joe Hart went further, suggesting the substitutions were an admission that Tuchel simply didn't trust his own players to land another punch. Tuchel, for his part, insists England just got too passive, not that his own changes caused it. The FA, at least publicly, is standing by him, and he's contracted through Euro 2028. But football doesn't run on public statements alone, and if results eventually force this issue, the FA will need names ready to go. So let's run through 5 of them, starting with the one that would send the loudest shockwaves through world football, Pep Guardiola. This isn't some fantasy pairing dreamed up by fans doom-scrolling after a heartbreak. It's genuinely on the table. Guardiola walked away from Manchester City at the end of this season, handing the reins to his former assistant Enzo Maresca, and reports out of Spain suggest he's now taking the kind of sabbatical he took after leaving Barcelona, with an eye on finally trying something he's never done in nearly 2 decades of management: coaching a national team. According to reports, Guardiola has told people close to him that England specifically is a job he'd like, not immediately, but down the line if the circumstances line up. Imagine that appeal to a dressing room stacked with the kind of talent Guardiola has spent a career trying to build from scratch. Jude Bellingham, Bukayo Saka, Morgan Rogers, players who'd walk into any Guardiola side without a second thought. The obstacle isn't ambition, it's timing, and the sheer novelty of international management for a man who's built his entire identity around daily hands-on control of a training ground. Whether he can adapt that control-freak brilliance to 6-week windows and long stretches on the sidelines is the real question. Depending on how the Tuchel saga ultimately plays out, the FA may be wary of reaching for another foreign appointment for a long time to come. But Guardiola's stature is the kind that makes an exception worth considering, and it's not as if his own homeland is likely to come calling either. Luis de la Fuente's reign in charge of Spain has been so successful that there's simply no vacancy for Guardiola to walk into, even if he wanted one. If Guardiola represents the dream scenario, Lee Carsley is the pragmatic one, sitting right under the FA's nose, and, tellingly, his odds have reportedly started shortening in the immediate aftermath of this very semi-final. Carsley isn't a headline name to the wider footballing public, but insiders know exactly what he's built. Since taking permanent charge of England's U21s, he's delivered back-to-back European Under-21 championships in 2023 and 2025, a feat no England age group coach has managed in decades, and he did it while handing senior debuts to Morgan Rogers, Noni Madueke and Tino Livramento, all of whom were out in the USA this summer. He's already had a taste of the senior job too, filling in as interim after Gareth Southgate's departure in 2024. Carsley also turned down a genuinely tempting offer from the Republic of Ireland, choosing to stay loyal to the FA's pathway instead, the kind of signal that suggests he sees himself as part of England's long-term plan, not just a stepping stone. His limitation is obvious: no senior club management on his CV, nothing but caretaker spells at Coventry, Brentford and Birmingham to point to beyond the youth setup. But for an FA that increasingly prizes continuity and familiarity with its own conveyor belt of talent, Carsley checks a box none of the others can. From the safest option to arguably the steadiest, Eddie Howe's name keeps resurfacing every time England's managerial situation gets shaky, and for good reason. He took Newcastle from relegation fodder to Champions League regulars, engineering one of the most complete rebuilds in English football this decade, even as the club's brightest stars, Alexander Isak, Anthony Gordon, Sandro Tonali, have all since moved on. There were even reports earlier this year that Howe was ready to leave St James Park for the right opportunity, with life at Newcastle growing more complicated by the season. What makes Howe compelling isn't just the results, it's the identity. Attacking, front-footed football married to defensive organisation that took time to mature but has clearly arrived, evidenced by Newcastle's ability to stay competitive despite losing key talent every summer. He's also proven himself a developer of England internationals in his own right, having played a direct role in Gordon's rise and helped shape Lewis Hall and Tino Livramento's games. He's not the marquee statement appointment Guardiola would be, but after the chaos of a bottled semi-final, reliable and battle-tested might be exactly the tonic the FA is after. Then there's a manager who lived through his own World Cup exit this summer, Mauricio Pochettino. The Argentine oversaw the co-host USA's tournament, and while there was real promise in spells, it ended in humbling fashion, a 4-1 round of 16 hammering by Belgium that exposed how far the Americans still have to go. Pochettino's contract with US Soccer expired the moment that final whistle blew, and while there's been talk of a 4-year extension on the table taking him to 2030, his intentions remain genuinely unclear, with some reports suggesting he's more tempted by a return to European club football. What he offers England is a track record built at the very top of the Premier League, with Tottenham, tactical flexibility, and a demonstrated willingness to trust young talent, all qualities that would translate well to this current England group. His trophy cabinet is thin though, and for a nation growing increasingly desperate to actually win something rather than just look good losing, that gap in his resume would invite scrutiny fast. Finally, there's a name that would have seemed almost laughable a few years back, but deserves a second look now: Graham Potter. His stock cratered during ill-fated spells at Chelsea and West Ham, but since taking over Sweden in October 2025, he's quietly rebuilt his reputation, guiding them to this very World Cup and earning a contract extension through 2030 for his trouble. That deal is precisely why he's more of an outsider than a genuine frontrunner these days. Buying him out wouldn't be simple, and Sweden's own campaign ended meekly, unable to lay a glove on France in the round of 32. Still, at his best, during his Brighton years especially, Potter's teams played some of the most progressive, structurally intelligent football English management has produced this generation, constantly shifting shape to squeeze the most out of modest squads. Give him Bellingham and Saka instead of Brighton's academy graduates, and there's a version of Potter that looks genuinely exciting. It's a longer shot than the rest of this list, but if the FA wants to think differently rather than default to the same handful of names, Potter is sitting right there. If the axe does eventually fall, the FA won't be short on options. It'll be short on excuses if it gets the next call wrong. For now, the FA's message is clear: Tuchel isn't going anywhere before Euro 2028. But make no mistake, the benefit of the doubt he once carried into this tournament is completely gone. Fans and pundits alike will be watching his next selection, his next substitution, his next big moment under pressure with a level of scrutiny he's never faced before. And another night like Atlanta won't just cost England a game, it will cost Tuchel the job outright. What did you think of England's performance, and do you think Tuchel is the right man for the job? Let us know in the comments. Remember to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Also be sure to turn on post notifications so that you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time. Bye.
Hey fam, this is your chance to build the jersey collection you've been waiting for. The Goal 90 bundle deal is live. Buy 2 jerseys and get 10% off. Buy 3 and get 15% off. Buy 4 and get a massive 25% off. Club kits, country kits, retro classics, pick your favourites and save big. And yes, every order comes with free worldwide shipping. Goal 90 bundle deal. Buy more, save more. Shop now at Goal 90 Shop.